The rain fell steadily, painting the streets of Chicago with a shimmering layer of wetness that reflected the glow of neon signs. The city buzzed faintly in the background, its usual chaos muted by the downpour. Amidst this urban symphony, a figure emerged from a sleek black hovercraft parked in a shadowy alley. His name was Daniel Carter, an assassin from the Vega star system, known for his precision and efficiency. Tonight, however, he felt uneasy, a sensation that gnawed at him despite his years of training and countless successful missions. Daniel adjusted the collar of his coat as he stepped into the open, scanning the area carefully. His target lived in a modest apartment building just a few blocks away. It wasn't the kind of place you'd expect to find someone important enough to warrant an alien hitman, but appearances could be deceiving, especially when it came to humans. They were unpredictable, resourceful, and dangerously clever, qualities that had earned them both admiration and fear across the galaxy. In his pocket, Daniel's fingers brushed against a small silver capsule. It was standard issue for every assassin assigned to eliminate a human target. A suicide pill, they called it. He had never questioned its purpose before. It was simply part of the protocol. Yet tonight, as he walked through the damp streets, he found himself wondering why it was necessary. What made humans so different, so dangerous? He pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the task ahead. The building where Emma Lewis resided loomed before him, unremarkable except for the faint light glowing in one of the upper windows. That was her apartment, according to the intel he'd received. Emma Lewis, a librarian, quiet and unassuming, with no apparent ties to anything significant. On paper, she seemed like an easy mark. But Daniel knew better than to underestimate anyone, especially not a human. He activated his cloaking device, rendering himself invisible to the naked eye. The mechanism hummed softly as he approached the fire escape at the rear of the building. Climbing silently, he reached the third floor and slipped through an open window into the dimly lit apartment. The room smelled faintly of old books and coffee, a stark contrast to the sterile environments he was accustomed to. Shelves lined the walls, crammed with volumes of all shapes and sizes. Papers were scattered across a desk near the center of the room, along with several peculiar gadgets that looked more advanced than anything typically found in human homes. At first glance, it appeared Emma had been working on something important. Daniel moved closer to examine the items on the desk. There were diagrams of alien technology, notes written in hurried handwriting, and what looked like sketches of spacecraft designs. He frowned, puzzled. This wasn't the workspace of an ordinary librarian. Something about this woman didn't add up. Before he could investigate further, a soft voice startled him. "I've been expecting someone like you." Daniel spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for the plasma blade strapped to his side. Standing in the doorway was Emma Lewis herself, dressed in casual clothes and holding a mug of tea. She didn't seem frightened or surprised by his presence. In fact, she looked almost amused, as though she'd anticipated this moment for some time. "You're early," she continued, stepping into the room. "Most assassins wait until midnight to make their move. I guess punctuality is a virtue, where you come from." Daniel hesitated, unsure how to respond. Her calm demeanor threw him off balance. Humans weren't supposed to act this way when confronted by an invader. They were supposed to panic, beg for mercy, or try to run. But Emma stood there as if she owned the situation, her eyes locked onto his invisibly cloaked form. "I don't need introductions," she said, setting the mug down on the desk. "You're here to kill me. Let's skip the theatrics and get straight to the point." With that, she pressed a button on a small handheld device she had been carrying. Instantly, the room was bathed in light as holographic projections sprang to life around them. Images of alien species, weapons, and battle strategies filled the air, swirling in a dazzling display of information. Daniel stared in disbelief, his mind racing to process what he was seeing. "Do you recognize any of these?" Emma asked, gesturing toward the holograms. "These are your people, your ships, your failed attempts to take us down." Daniel's unease deepened. How did she know so much? And why hadn't his superiors warned him about her? For the first time in his career, he felt uncertain, vulnerable even. The mission that had seemed straightforward just moments ago now felt like walking into a trap. Emma crossed her arms, her expression serious but not hostile. "You're not the first assassin they've sent after me, and unless you want to end up like the others, you'll listen carefully to what I have to say." Daniel tightened his grip on the hilt of his plasma blade, torn between attacking and retreating. Something about this woman was different. Dangerous, yes, but also intriguing. He couldn't shake the feeling that she held answers to questions he hadn't even thought to ask. Slowly, reluctantly, he deactivated his cloaking device, revealing himself to her. "Talk," he said finally, his voice low and cautious. "But make it quick." Emma nodded, satisfied that she had his attention. She began explaining things that defied everything Daniel had ever been taught about humans. According to her, humanity wasn't just another species struggling to survive in the vastness of space. They were survivors by nature, adaptable and resilient in ways that terrified their adversaries. Their unpredictability made them nearly impossible to defeat, and their ability to turn enemies into allies was legendary. As she spoke, Daniel listened intently, his initial skepticism giving way to curiosity. By the time she finished, he realized, he had underestimated not only Emma but humanity as a whole. The pieces were starting to fall into place. The reason behind the suicide capsule, the whispered warnings among his peers, the countless stories of failed missions. Humans weren't just targets. They were fighters, thinkers, and strategists who refused to bow to anyone. When Emma paused, waiting for his reaction, Daniel exhaled slowly, letting the weight of her words sink in. For the first time in his life, he questioned the morality of his profession. Was he truly serving justice, or was he merely a pawn in a larger game designed to suppress humanity's rise? Outside, the rain continued to fall, masking the sound of footsteps echoing through the empty hallway. Neither Daniel nor Emma noticed the new presence approaching, their focus entirely consumed by the conversation unfolding between them. Whatever happened next would change the course of both their lives, and perhaps the fate of two worlds. Daniel stood frozen, his mind struggling to process everything Emma had just revealed. The holograms floating around the room painted a picture he couldn't ignore. Humans weren't the fragile, insignificant species he'd been led to believe. They were fighters, survivors who had outlasted countless attempts to destroy them. And Emma Lewis wasn't just some random librarian. She was a key player in humanity's resistance against alien forces. Emma watched him closely, her expression calm but calculating. She could see the gears turning in his head, the cracks forming in his resolve. "You look confused," she said, her tone almost gentle. "That's good. It means you're starting to think for yourself." Daniel clenched his jaw, torn between anger and curiosity. He had trained his entire life to follow orders without question, to execute missions with precision and detachment. But now, faced with undeniable evidence of humanity's strength and ingenuity, he felt his loyalty wavering. For the first time, he wondered if his superiors had been lying to him all along. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked finally, his voice low and steady despite the turmoil inside him. "What do you want from me?" Emma crossed her arms and leaned back slightly, as though considering how best to answer. "I want you to understand the truth," she said simply. "Your people, they're scared of us. Scared because we don't play by their rules. We adapt, we fight back, and we win. Every assassin they send ends up failing, one way or another. Some die trying. Others change sides." The words hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. Change sides? The idea was unthinkable, yet it lingered in his mind like an unwelcome guest. He glanced at the suicide capsule still tucked into his pocket, its presence suddenly more menacing than reassuring. Was it really meant to prevent capture? Or was it a failsafe to ensure assassins like him never defected? Before he could dwell on that thought further, Emma gestured toward the holograms again. "Take a closer look," she urged. "These aren't just random pieces of information. They're proof of what happens when humans refuse to give up. Look at these battles, these strategies. Do you recognize any of them?" Reluctantly, Daniel stepped closer, examining the projections more carefully. One image depicted a group of human soldiers using makeshift weapons to repel an alien invasion force. Another showed a captured assassin being interrogated, his face twisted in anguish as he confessed secrets to his captors. There were documents detailing intercepted communications, blueprints of alien technology reverse-engineered by human scientists, and even recordings of defectors explaining why they chose to join humanity's cause. It was overwhelming, but also undeniably compelling. Each piece of evidence reinforced Emma's claim that humans were not to be underestimated. What's more, it raised questions about the morality of his mission and the motivations of those who had sent him here. "You said I'm not the first," Daniel murmured, his gaze lingering on the image of the captured assassin. "What happened to the others?" Emma sighed, her expression softening slightly. "Some died quickly, either by their own hand or ours. Others took longer to break, but eventually, they all came to the same conclusion. Humanity isn't their enemy. Their leaders are the real threat, the ones hoarding power, spreading fear, and silencing dissent. Once they realized that, they had two choices: help us or stay silent forever." Daniel frowned, processing her words. The implications were staggering. If what she said was true, then every mission he'd ever completed had been part of a larger scheme to suppress humanity's rise. He had been used, a tool wielded by those who feared losing control. The realization left a bitter taste in his mouth. "And what about you?" he asked, turning his attention back to Emma. "Why are you doing this? Why risk your life fighting something so much bigger than you?" Emma smiled faintly, though there was no humor in it. "Because someone has to," she replied. "I didn't choose this path. It chose me. When I stumbled upon classified documents during my research years ago, I realized I couldn't turn a blind eye. Humanity deserves a chance to thrive, free from oppression. And if that means standing up to beings like you, then so be it." Her conviction was palpable, radiating off her in waves. Daniel found himself both intimidated and impressed. This woman wasn't just smart, she was fearless, driven by a sense of purpose that transcended personal safety or gain. It was a quality he hadn't encountered before, and it made him question everything he thought he knew about humans. For several long moments, neither of them spoke. The rain outside continued to patter against the windows, filling the silence with its rhythmic sound. Finally, Daniel broke the quiet. "Even if I believed you," he began cautiously, "what makes you think I'd switch sides? My people will hunt me down if I fail this mission." Emma nodded, acknowledging the validity of his concern. "True," she admitted, "but ask yourself this. Would you rather die serving a lie or live fighting for something real? You've seen what we're capable of. You know we won't stop until we're free. Wouldn't it be better to stand with us instead of against us?" Her question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Daniel looked away, staring at the holograms once more. The images seemed to mock him, reminding him of his ignorance and blind obedience. He thought about the countless lives lost in pointless conflicts orchestrated by his kind, the sacrifices made in the name of fear and control. Could he really go back to that life knowing what he knew now? As if sensing his internal struggle, Emma moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm not asking you to decide right this second," she said softly. "But I am offering you a choice. Stay here tonight. Think about it. If you still want to kill me in the morning, I won't stop you. But if you're willing to listen, to learn, I'll show you things that might change your perspective." Daniel hesitated, weighing his options. On one hand, walking away now would mean returning to a life of servitude, carrying out orders he no longer trusted. On the other hand, staying put him at risk, not just from his own people, but from the uncertainty of allying with humans. It was a gamble, one that required faith in something he barely understood. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he nodded. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll stay. but don't expect me to trust you." Emma smiled, relief flickering across her face. "Trust takes time," she agreed, "and we've got plenty of that." With that, she turned off the holograms, plunging the room into relative darkness save for the soft glow of a desk lamp. She gestured toward a chair near the desk. "Sit down," she offered. "We can talk more, or not, if you prefer. Either way, you're safe here for now." Daniel hesitated briefly before sitting, his movements stiff and cautious. Despite her assurances, he remained on edge, his instincts screaming at him to leave while he still could. Yet deep down, he knew he wouldn't. Not yet, anyway. Something about Emma, and the truth she represented, had sparked a fire within him, one that refused to be extinguished. As the night wore on, the two of them sat in uneasy silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the grime of the city streets. Inside, a storm of doubt and possibility raged within Daniel Carter, threatening to reshape his destiny, and perhaps the fate of two worlds. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the cracks in the blinds, casting long shadows across Emma's cluttered apartment. Daniel sat on the edge of a worn-out couch, his elbows resting on his knees as he stared at the floor. He hadn't slept. Not really. His mind had been racing all night, replaying Emma's words and the evidence she'd shown him. The holograms, the stories of defectors, the undeniable proof that humanity wasn't just surviving but thriving, despite constant threats from alien forces. It all weighed heavily on him. Emma emerged from the kitchen, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. She handed one to Daniel without saying a word, then sat down in a chair opposite him. Her movements were calm and deliberate, as if she understood the gravity of what he was going through. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the faint hum of the city outside and the occasional clink of their mugs as they sipped cautiously. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "You said you could show me more," he began, his voice rough from lack of sleep. "Things that might change my perspective." Emma nodded, setting her mug aside. "I can," she replied simply, "but it won't be easy. Some of it will make you angry. Some of it might even scare you. Are you ready for that?" Daniel hesitated, glancing at the suicide capsule still tucked into his pocket. He had considered using it more than once during the night, each time stopping himself just short of action. Now, as he looked at Emma, he realized he couldn't go back to blindly following orders, not after everything he'd learned. Slowly, he nodded. "Show me." Emma stood up and walked over to a locked cabinet near the desk. After entering a code on a small keypad, she opened it to reveal stacks of files, data drives, and other devices. She pulled out a thin tablet-like device and returned to her seat. "This is something we recovered from a failed assassination attempt last year," she explained, powering it on. "It contains classified information about your people's plans for Earth and for humanity." She handed the device to Daniel, who took it reluctantly. As he scrolled through the contents, his expression grew darker with each passing moment. The files detailed systematic efforts to suppress human technological advancements, manipulate governments, and even orchestrate mass extinctions under the guise of natural disasters or pandemics. There were records of secret experiments conducted on human prisoners, maps marking potential invasion routes, and chilling memos outlining strategies to destabilize global economies. This is insane," Daniel muttered, his hands trembling slightly. "They've been planning this for decades, maybe longer." Emma leaned forward, her eyes intense. "And they're not alone," she added. "Your leaders have allies among other species, all working together to keep humanity contained. They see us as a threat because we don't fit into their neat little hierarchy. We challenge them, adapt faster, and refuse to bow down. That scares them more than anything." Daniel felt a surge of anger rising within him, directed not just at his superiors but at himself. How many missions had he carried out without questioning their purpose? How many innocent lives had he taken in service of a lie? The weight of his guilt threatened to crush him, but he forced himself to focus. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice strained. If I stay, if I help you, what's the plan? Emma smiled faintly, though there was no joy in it. First, we need to get you off the grid, she said. Your people will know you've failed by now and they'll send reinforcements. You're too valuable to let go easily. Daniel nodded grimly. He knew she was right. Assassins like him didn't just disappear. They were hunted relentlessly until eliminated. But staying hidden wouldn't be enough, not if he wanted to fight. Deck. And after that? He pressed. After that, Emma continued, we use your knowledge to strike back. You know their tactics, their weaknesses. With your help, we can expose their plans to the rest of humanity and rally support for the resistance. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. But it's possible. Her words sparked a flicker of hope in Daniel, though it was tinged with uncertainty. Could they really pull it off? Humans were resourceful, yes, but they were also divided by borders, ideologies, and fear. Uniting them against a common enemy would require more than just intelligence and strategy. It would take courage, determination, and sacrifice, Mum. Not asking you to trust me completely, Emma added, sensing his hesitation. But I am asking you to believe in something bigger than yourself. Humanity has survived worse than this. We can do it again, but we need people like you to stand with us. Daniel exhaled slowly, letting her words sink in. For so long, he had defined himself by his loyalty to his kind, by his willingness to follow orders without question. Now faced with the truth about his mission and the reality of humanity's resilience, he realized he had a choice: continue down the path of destruction or forge a new one. The decision wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I'll help you, he said finally, his voice firm despite the turmoil inside him. But I need to know one thing. Why are you doing this? Why risk everything for a cause that might fail? Emma's smile softened, becoming almost wistful. Because someone has to, she replied. If not me, then who? If not now, then when? Humanity deserves a chance to decide its own future, to reach for the stars instead of being crushed beneath them. And if that means risking my life, then so be it. Her conviction was infectious, reigniting the spark of defiance Daniel had felt the previous night. He may not have trusted her fully yet, but he respected her passion and resolve. Together, they could accomplish something extraordinary, or die trying. Over the next few hours, Emma outlined their immediate steps. First, they would leave the apartment and relocate to a safe house where Daniel could lay low while they planned their next move. From there, they would begin gathering allies, both human and alien defectors willing to join their cause. It was a daunting task, but neither of them shied away from the challenge. As they packed up the essentials, Daniel found himself glancing at the suicide capsule one last time. Without hesitation, he removed it from his pocket and crushed it between his fingers, letting the shards fall to the floor. The act was symbolic, a declaration of his intent to break free from his past and embrace a new future. Emma noticed the gesture and smiled approvingly. That's a good start, she said. Now let's finish what we started. With that, they stepped out into the bustling streets of Chicago, disappearing into the crowd as though they were just another pair of ordinary citizens. But beneath the surface, a revolution was brewing, one fueled by truth, courage, and an unshakable belief in the power of humanity to overcome even the greatest odds. And at its heart stood two unlikely allies, bound together by a shared vision of freedom and justice. Neither of them knew what the future held, but one thing was certain: they were ready to face it head-on, no matter the cost. The safe house was located in an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city, its exterior battered and unremarkable. Inside, however, it buzzed with activity. Humans and a few alien defectors moved about purposefully, some poring over maps and documents while others tinkered with advanced technology, salvaged from past encounters. It was clear that Emma's resistance network had been operating for years, quietly building momentum under the radar of their enemies. Daniel stood near the entrance, his arms crossed as he observed the scene. The weight of his decision to defect pressed heavily on him. But there was also a strange sense of relief. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was part of something meaningful, something that mattered more than blind obedience or personal survival. Emma approached him, holding a tablet filled with updates from various teams scattered across the globe. "Welcome to the heart of the operation," she said, her tone lighter than usual. "It's not much to look at, but it gets the job done." Daniel nodded slowly, taking it all in. "This is bigger than I thought," he admitted. "How long has this been going on?" "Years," Emma replied. "We've been preparing for a fight like this since the first signs of alien interference surfaced. It wasn't easy, convincing people to trust us, finding allies willing to risk everything, but we've made progress." She handed him the tablet, pointing out key locations highlighted on a digital map. "These are our strongholds," she explained. "Places where we've gathered supplies, trained fighters, and built networks of communication. With your knowledge of alien tactics, we can strengthen these positions and anticipate their next moves." Daniel studied the map intently, his mind already working through strategies. He recognized patterns in the data, patterns that only someone with his training could spot. "If they know I'm here, they'll target these places first," he said, tapping a cluster of markers near the eastern coast. "They'll assume you're consolidating resources there." Emma nodded grimly. "Which means we need to move quickly. We can fortify those sites, but we'll also have to create diversions elsewhere to draw their attention away." For the next several hours, Daniel worked alongside Emma and her team, sharing insights into alien military operations and helping them refine their plans. His expertise proved invaluable, earning him cautious respect from the humans who had once seen him as nothing more than a threat. Even the alien defectors warmed up to him after hearing his story, seeing in him a reflection of their own struggles to break free from oppressive regimes. As the day wore on, Daniel found himself growing more comfortable in his new role. The initial tension between him and the others began to fade, replaced by a shared determination to succeed. He learned names, faces, and stories, each one reinforcing his belief that humanity's resilience stemmed not just from individual strength but from collective unity. One of the defectors, a tall insectoid creature named Kale, pulled Daniel aside during a break. "You're different from the others they sent," Kyle said, his voice low and raspy. "Most never questioned their orders. They came here thinking they were superior, only to realize too late how wrong they were." Daniel met Kale's gaze, noting the scars etched into his exoskeleton, marks of battles fought and survived. "What changed your mind?" he asked. Kale hesitated before answering. "I saw what they did to my world," he said finally. "They promised protection, prosperity, all lies. When I refused to follow their commands, they destroyed everything I cared about. I barely escaped with my life. Humanity gave me a second chance, a reason to keep fighting." His words resonated deeply with Daniel, reminding him of his own journey. Like Kale, he had once believed in the righteousness of his own mission. Now standing among those who had suffered because of it, he understood the true cost of blind loyalty. Later that evening, as the group gathered around a makeshift table to finalize their strategy, Emma addressed them with quiet authority. "We're running out of time," she said. "Their reinforcements will arrive soon, and when they do, we need to be ready. Every position must be fortified, every contingency accounted for." She turned to Daniel, her expression serious but trusting. "You'll lead the Eastern Front," she told him. "Your knowledge of their weaknesses gives us the edge we need to hold them off." Daniel felt a surge of responsibility wash over him. Leading humans and aliens into battle was a far cry from carrying out solo missions. But he knew he couldn't back down now. "Understood," he said firmly. "We'll make sure they regret coming here." The room erupted into murmurs of agreement, the mood shifting from tense uncertainty to resolute determination. As the meeting concluded, Daniel stayed behind to speak with Emma privately. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "Putting me in charge, it's a big risk." Emma smiled faintly, though there was no humor in it. "You're the best person for the job," she replied. "Besides, if we're going to win this, we need everyone pulling their weight, including you." Her confidence in him was both humbling and motivating. Daniel nodded, pushing aside any lingering doubts. "All right," he said, "but promise me one thing. If things go south, don't hesitate to pull the plug. Humanity comes first." Emma placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch firm yet reassuring. "Don't worry," she said. "We'll get through this together." In the days that followed, Daniel threw himself into preparations, coordinating with teams spread across multiple locations. He taught them how to counter alien weapons, identify surveillance drones, and exploit vulnerabilities in enemy defenses. His efforts earned him grudging admiration from even the most skeptical members of the Resistance. Meanwhile, Emma worked tirelessly to rally support from outside sources. She reached out to sympathetic factions within alien communities, urging them to join the fight against oppression. Her speeches were passionate, painting a vision of a future where all species could coexist without fear or domination. As the deadline for the expected attack drew closer, tensions ran high. Supplies were stretched thin, and exhaustion began to take its toll. But despite the challenges, morale remained strong. The shared goal of freedom united them, driving them forward even when hope seemed distant. On the eve of the anticipated assault, Daniel stood atop the warehouse roof, staring out at the horizon. The city lights twinkled in the distance, a reminder of the world they were fighting to protect. Emma joined him moments later, handing him a cup of coffee. "You've come a long way," she said softly. "Further than anyone expected." Daniel took a sip, savoring the warmth. "Not far enough," he replied. "But maybe someday." Emma smiled, her eyes reflecting the same mix of hope and resolve that had brought them this far. "Someday," she agreed. "For now, let's focus on surviving tomorrow." Below them, the Resistance braced for the storm ahead. Together, they would face whatever came their way, not as victims, but as warriors determined to shape their own destiny. And at the center of it all stood Daniel Carter, a former assassin turned ally, ready to prove that redemption was possible, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The first wave of the attack came just before dawn, as Daniel had predicted. The Eastern Front was hit hard, with alien forces deploying advanced weaponry and overwhelming numbers. But thanks to Daniel's strategies, the Resistance was ready. Hidden bunkers shielded fighters from aerial bombardments, while decoy signals lured enemy drones into traps rigged with explosives. Daniel moved through the chaos like a ghost, his years of training making him both deadly and elusive. He coordinated with human squads on the ground, directing their movements and ensuring they stayed one step ahead of the invaders. His voice crackled over comms devices, calm but urgent, guiding them through each phase of the battle. "They're trying to flank us," shouted a young soldier named Ryan, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. "Hold your position," Daniel replied sharply. "Reinforcements are 2 minutes out, trust me." Moments later, a team of alien defectors arrived, unleashing a barrage of counterfire that forced the attackers to retreat. Cheers erupted among the humans, though Daniel didn't allow himself to celebrate. There would be time for that later, if they survived. Across the battlefield, Emma worked tirelessly to maintain communication between scattered units. She relayed critical updates from her makeshift command center, her fingers flying across keyboards as she tracked troop movements and resource levels. Though she wasn't physically in the fight, her role was no less vital. Without her coordination, the Resistance would have crumbled under the pressure. As the sun rose higher in the sky, the tide began to turn. The alien forces, expecting an easy victory, found themselves bogged down by relentless resistance. Every time they advanced, they were met with clever ambushes and unexpected counterattacks. It became clear that humanity, and its growing number of allies, wasn't going to back down. By midday, news reached the safe house. Reinforcements from other alien factions had joined the fight. These defectors brought not only manpower but also insider knowledge about the invaders' weaknesses. Their arrival shifted the balance decisively in favor of the resistance. Kyle, the insectoid defector who had spoken with Daniel earlier, played a crucial role in rallying these newcomers. Standing atop a ruined building, he addressed the mixed group of humans and aliens, his raspy voice carrying over the din of battle. "We are not so different," he declared. "All of us have suffered at the hands of those who seek to control us. Today we stand together, not as enemies but as equals." His words ignited a surge of determination among the fighters, who cheered loudly before charging back into the fray. Inspired by Kale's speech, even the most weary soldiers pushed forward with renewed energy. Back at the Eastern Front, Daniel led a daring assault on one of the invaders' key supply depots. Using stolen codes and improvised explosives, he and his team infiltrated the heavily guarded facility, destroying vital equipment and crippling the enemy's ability to sustain prolonged combat. By nightfall, the invaders were in disarray, their once coordinated efforts reduced to desperate attempts to regroup. Emma monitored the situation closely, her eyes scanning reports as they poured in. When she received confirmation that the depot had been neutralized, she allowed herself a brief smile. Turning to her assistant, she said, "Tell everyone to prepare for the final push. We've got them on the ropes." The last phase of the battle unfolded under the cover of darkness. The resistance launched a coordinated offensive, hitting multiple targets simultaneously to stretch the invaders thin. Fires raged across the landscape, illuminating silhouettes of fighters locked in fierce combat. Explosions echoed in the distance, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Through it all, Daniel remained at the forefront, leading by example. He took down enemy commanders, dismantled automated turrets, and kept morale high among his troops. Though exhaustion gnawed at him, he refused to slow down. This was his chance to make amends, to prove that he had chosen the right side. As the hours dragged on, the invaders' resolve finally broke. What remained of their forces retreated hastily, abandoning weapons and vehicles in their wake. The resistance didn't pursue them. Instead, they focused on securing the area and tending to the wounded. When the dust settled, the cost of victory became painfully clear. Bodies littered the battlefield, both human and alien. Survivors wandered amidst the wreckage, searching for friends or family members. Tears flowed freely, mingling with the blood and ash that coated the ground. But amid the sorrow, there was also triumph. Humanity, and its allies, had stood against overwhelming odds and emerged victorious. Word of the victory spread quickly, igniting hope in communities around the globe. For the first time in decades, people dared to imagine a future free from oppression. In the aftermath, Emma and Daniel stood together on a hill overlooking the battlefield. The air smelled of smoke and burned metal, but neither of them seemed to notice. They watched silently as survivors began the long process of rebuilding. "You did it," Emma said after a while, her voice soft but filled with pride. "You helped turn the tide." Daniel shook his head slightly. "Not just me," he corrected. "Everyone did this. Together." Emma smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Still, you made a difference. You showed others what's possible when we refused to give up." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of everything they had endured and achieved hung heavy in the air. Finally, Daniel exhaled slowly, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. He had started this journey as an assassin, sent to destroy humanity. Now he stood among its defenders, proud to call them allies. "What happens next?" he asked quietly. Emma glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "We keep fighting," she replied. "There will be more battles, more challenges. But for now, we've earned a moment to rest and to dream of something better." As the first rays of sunlight broke through the horizon, casting a golden glow over the battered landscape, Daniel felt a flicker of optimism. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he knew one thing for certain: humanity's spirit couldn't be extinguished, and as long as there were those willing to fight for freedom, the galaxy would never truly belong to tyrants. Together, Emma and Daniel turned away from the battlefield, ready to face whatever came next. Their bond, a testament to trust forged in the fires of conflict, would guide them through the uncertain days ahead. In a universe defined by fear and division, they had proven that unity could overcome even the greatest odds.